Opus Dei, formerly known as the Prelature of the Holy Cross, and Opus Dei is an institution of the Catholic Church. The majority of its membership are lay people, and the remainder are secular priests under the governance of prelate, educated by specific members, elected by specific members, appointed by the Pope. Opus Dei is Latin for work of God, hence the organization is often referred to by members and supporters as the work. Opus Dei was founded in Spain in 1928 by the Catholic priest Jose Maria Escava, sorry, I can't say that name properly, and was given the final Catholic Church approval in 1950 by Pope Pius. John Paul II made it a personal prelature in 1982 by the apostate constitution. That is, the jurisdiction of its own bishops covers the persons of Opus Dei wherever they are, rather than geographical dioceses. When Opus Dei has met controversies, they remain influential within the Roman Church. As of 2018, there were 95,318 members of the prelature and 93,203 laypersons and 2,115 priests. These figures do not include the diocesan priest members of the Opus Dei Priestly Society of the Holy Cross estimates the number to 2,000 in the year 2005. Members are more in 90 countries. About 70% of Opus Dei members live in their private homes, leading family lives with secular careers, while the other 30% are celibate, of whom the majority live in Opus Dei centres. Aside from their personal charity and social work, Opus Dei members organise training in Catholic spirituality applied to the daily life. Members are involved in running universities, university residence schools, publishing houses, hospitals, technical and agricultural training centres. Opus Dei was founded by a Catholic priest on the 2nd of October 1928, Madrid, Spain. According to Escrivá, on the day that he experienced a vision in which he saw Opus Dei, he gave the organization the name Opus Dei, which in Latin means work of God, in order to underscore the belief that the organization was not his work, but rather God's work. Throughout his life, Escrivá held that the founding of Opus Dei had a supernatural character. Escrivá summarized Opus Dei mission as a way of helping others, ordinary Christians, to understand that their life is a way of holiness and evangelism. And those who grasp this ideal of holiness, the work offers the spiritual assistance and training that they need to put it into practice. Initially, Opus Dei was only open to men, but in 1930, Escobar started to admit women based on what he believed to be a communication from God. In 1936, the organization suffered a temporary setback with the outbreak of Spanish Civil War, as many Catholic priests and religious figures, including Escobar, were forced into hiding. After the Civil War was won by General Francisco Franco, Escobar was able to return to Madrid. Escobar himself recounted that it was Spain where Opus Dei found the greatest difficulties because of the enemies of the personal freedom and traditionalists who he felt misunderstood Opus Dei's idea. Despite this, Opus Dei flourished during the years of the Francoism. I'm sorry, I can't say that properly. Spreading throughout Spain, and after 1945, expanding internationally. In 1939, Escobar published The Way, a collection of 999. Oh, look at that number again. Maxims concerning the spirituality for people involved in secular affairs. In the 1940s, Opus Dei found an early critic in the Jesuit Superior General, Waldemar Lechetsky, who told the Vatican that he considered Opus Dei very dangerous for the Church in Spain, citing its secretive character and calling it a form of Christian Masonry. In 1945, a year after Escobar moved the organization headquarters to Rome, Opus Dei received a decree of praise from approval from Pope Pius, making it an institute of the pontifical right, i.e., under the direct governance of the Pope. In 1950, Pius granted definitive approval of Opus Dei, therefore allowing married people to join the organization and secular clergy to be admitted to the Priestly Society of the Holy Cross. Several Opus Dei members, such as Alberto Tresses, were ministers Opus Deistas under the director Franco in Spain. Opus Dei in politics. Between 1950 and 1980, illegal adoptions occurred in Spain. Lost children and many Opus Dei members, such as doctors, priests, and secret police, were systematically responsible for around 300,000 baby kidnappings. Because of questionable businesses, activities such as baby trafficking, the Opus Dei organization was called the Holy Mafia or Santa Mafia in the 1970s, a term still used today. Post-foundational years. In 1975, Escobar died and was succeeded by Alvaro del Portillo. In 1982, Opus Dei was made into the personal prelature. This means that Opus Dei is part of the Catholic Church, and apostate of the member falls under the direct jurisdiction of the prelate of Opus Dei wherever they are. As to what the law lays down for the ordinary faithful, the lay members of Opus Dei, being no different from other Catholics, continue to be under the jurisdiction of the diocesan bishop. In the words of John Paul II, ut sit. 1/3 of the world's bishops sent letters petitioning the canonization of Escobar. Escobar was beheaded in 1992 in the midst of controversy prompted by questions about his suitability for sainthood. In 2002, approximately 300,000 people gathered at St. Peter's Square on the day John Paul II canonized him. According to John L. Allen Jr., Escobar is venerated by millions. There are other members who profess benefication have been open. Ernest Confido, a father of 5 children, a pioneer in pediatric research in Guatemala. Montserrat Grasses, a teenage Catalan student who died of cancer. Tony Zeffel, a Swiss engineer. Thomas Alva and his wife. Can't say that, sorry. Spanish married couple. Can't say that one either. Argentina engineer Dora del Hoyo, a domestic worker. Father Jose Maria Hendez Garcia and Father Jose Luis Masquez de Melguel, a Spanish priest who became Opus Dei in the United States. During the pontificate of John Paul II, 2 members of Opus Dei, Jean-Louis Capri Throde and Jean Herrán Casedo, were made cardinals. In September 2005, Pope Benedict placed the newly installed statue of Jose Escobar in place in the outside walls of the niche of St. Peter's Basilica, a place for the founders of the Catholic organizations. During the same year, Opus Dei received some unwanted attention due to the extraordinary success of the novel Da Vinci Code, in which both Opus Dei and the Catholic Church itself are depicted negatively. The film's version was released globally in May 2006, further polarizing views of the organization. In 2014, Pope Francis, through delegate, defeated Alvaro de Portillo and said that he teaches us that in simplicity and ordinance of our life we can find a sure path to His Holiness. At the end of 2014, the prelature had been established in 69 countries. This is where its members are present in 90 countries. Javier Rodriguez, the second prelate of Opus Dei, died 12th of December 2016 and was succeeded by Fernando. This guy. He was elected as the new prelate of Opus Dei in 23rd of January 2017 and on the same day was appointed by the Pope Francis as such. 2019, this lady was one of the first women to join Opus Dei, was beheaded in Madrid, Spain. She is the first faithful as well as the first woman in Opus Dei to be beheaded. Sexual abuse case. In 2005, the first publicly known sexual abuse case of Opus Dei in the US against C. John McCoskey was settled for $977,000. An early abuse case became known in 2013 involving a Peruvian auxiliary bishop, Gabinino Miranda Melgero, was ignored by Opus Dei. In July 2020, Opus Dei publicly acknowledged for the first time ever that they had a sexual abuse case, this one involving a priest, Manuel Consina in Spain. Spirituality doctrine. Opus Dei is an organization of the Catholic Church. As such, it shares doctrines of the Catholic Church and has no other teachings than the teaching of magnetism. The Roman Catholic Church is the church claimed authority or offers to give authentic interpretation of the Word of God, whether it's in written form or in the form of tradition of the Holy See. As per its founder, Opus Dei places special emphasis on certain aspects of Catholic doctrine. A central figure of Opus Dei's theory is that its focus in the lives of ordinary cardinals who are neither priests nor monks. Opus Dei emphasizes the universal call to holiness, the belief that everyone should aspire to be a saint as per Jesus' commandment to love God with all your heart, Matthew 22:37, and be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect, Matthew 5:48. Opus Dei also teaches that sanctity is well within the reach of everyone, not just a few special individuals, given Jesus' teaching that he demands it easy and light, as his divine assistance is assured, Matthew 11:6 to 28:30. Opus Dei does not have monks or nuns, and only a minority of its members are priests. Opus Dei emphasizes uniting spiritual life with professional, social, and family life. Members of Opus Dei can lead ordinary lives with traditional families and secular careers and strive to sanctify ordinary life. Indeed, Pope John Paul II called Escrivá the saint of ordinary life. Similarly, Opus Dei stresses the importance of work and professional competence. While some religious institutes encourage their members to withdraw from the material world, Opus Dei exhorts its members and all lay Catholics to find God in daily life and to perform their work excellently as a service to society and as a fitting offering to God. Opus Dei teaches that work not only contributes to social progress but its path to holiness, and its founder advises people to sanctify your work, sanctify yourself in your work, and sanctify others through your work. The biblical roots of the Catholic doctrine, according to the founder, are in the phrase God created man to work, Genesis 2:15, and Jesus' long life as an ordinary carpenter in a small town. Escrivá, who stressed the Christian duty to follow Christ's example, also points to the gospel account that Jesus has done everything well, Mark 7:37. The foundation of the Christian life, stressed Escrivá, is a divine filiation. Christians are the children of God, identified with Christ's life and mission, are the main features of Opus Dei according to its official literature of freedom, respecting choice and taking personal responsibility, charity, love of God, and all of others' loves. At the bottom of Escrivá's understanding is the universal call to holiness, are two dimensions, subjective and objective. According to Fernando, this guy, a Catholic theologian and a prelate of Opus Dei since 2017, the subjective is the call given to each person to become a saint regardless of his place in society. This subjective refers to what Escrivá calls Christian materialism. All of creation, even the most material situation, is a meeting place with God and leads to union with Him. I'll leave the links in the description. It got prayers, mortification, governance, organization, its activities, Pope John Paul II's 1982 decree known as the Apostate Constitution, and this constitution was taken from the Jesuits' constitution. Opus Dei was established as a personal prelature of a new official structure in the Catholic Church, similar to a diocese in that it contains lay people and secular priests who are led by a bishop. However, whereas bishop normally has territory or diocese, the prelate of the Opus Dei is the pastor to the members, priests of the Opus Dei worldwide, no matter what diocese they lay in. To date, Opus Dei is the only personal prelature in existence, in addition to being governed by Udsit and by Catholic Church's general law. Opus Dei is governed by the Church's particular law concerning Opus Dei, otherwise known as Opus Dei statutes. This specifies the objects and workings of the prelature. The prelature is under the Congregation for Bishops. The head of Opus Dei prelature is known as the prelate. The prelate is a primary governing authority and assisted by two councils, the General Council made up of men and the Central Advisory made up of women. The prelate holds the position for life. The current prelate of Opus Dei is this guy, who became the third prelate of Opus Dei on the 23rd of January 2017. The first prelate of Opus Dei was Alvarado de Portillo, who held the position from 1982 until his death in 1994. Opus Dei's highest assembly bodies are the General Congresses, which are usually convened once every 8 years. They are a separate congress for the men and women branch of Opus Dei. The General Congress are made up of members appointed by the prelate and are responsible for advising him about the prelate's future. The Men's General Congress also elects the prelate from a list of candidates chosen by their female counterparts. After the death of a prelate, a special elective General Congress is convened. The women nominate their preferred candidates for the prelate and is voted up by men to become the next prelate, an appointment that must be confirmed by the Pope. It goes on about membership. 2018, they had 95,318 members in the prelature. 93,203 are lay persons, men and women, and 2,115 priests. Activities. The leaders of the Opus Dei describe the organization as teaching entity whose main activity is to train Catholics to assume personal responsibility in sanctifying their secular world within. This teaching done by means of theory and practice. I meant to share this one on mortification before. As a spiritually forward people, Opus Dei focuses on performing sacrifices pertaining to normal duties and to its emphasis on charity and cheerfulness. But much public attention is focused on Opus Dei's practice of mortification, the voluntary offering up of discomfort for pain and God. This includes fasting for its celebrate members or corporal mortifications, such as inflicting pain, self-flagellation, sleeping without a pillow, sleeping on the floor, fasting, and, if compatible with their family or professional duties, remaining silent for certain hours during the day. Mortification has a long history in many religions, including Catholic Church. It has been endorsed by the popes as a way of following Christ, who died in a bloody crucifixion, and who, speaking of anybody that sought to be his discipline, said, "Let him deny himself and take up the cross daily and follow me." Luke 9:23. Supporters say the opposition to mortification is rooted in having lost one, the sense of enormity of sin or offence against God, and consequent penance, both interior and exterior, and two, the notions of wounded human nature and the conscience or inclination to sin, and thus need a spiritual battle, and three, a spirit of sacrifice for the love and supernatural ends, and not only for physical enchantment. And they do a lot of work in universities all over the world as well. Relationship with Catholic leaders. Um, this guy, the Bishop of Madrid, where Opus Dei was born, supported Opus Dei and then defended it in the 1940s by saying that this Opus is truly Dei, this work is truly God's. Contrary to the attacks of secrecy and heresy, the bishop described Opus Dei founder as someone who was open as a child and the most obedient to the church hierarchy. In the 1950s, Pope Pius told the most senior Australian bishop, Cardinal Norman Gilroy, that Escrivá is a true saint and a man sent by God for our times. Pius gave Opus Dei the canonical status of pontifical right, an institution depending directly and exclusively on Vatican and its internal governance. In 1960, Pope John cemented that Opus Dei opened up unsuspected horizons of the apostate. Furthermore, in 1964, Pope Paul praised the organization in a handwritten letter to Escrivá, saying, "Opus Dei is a rigorous expression of the perennial youth of the Church, fully open to the demands of modern apostate. We look with paternal satisfaction on all that Opus Dei has achieved and achieving for the kingdom of God, the desire of doing good that guides it, and the burning love for the Church and its visible head that distinguishes it, and the ardent zeal for the souls that impels it along the arduous and difficult paths of the apostate, of the presence and the witness of every sector in contemporary life." The relationship between Paul and Opus Dei, according to Alberto Moncada, a doctor of sociology and ex-member, was stormy. After the Second Vatican Council concluded in 1965, Pope Paul denied Opus Dei's petition to become a personal prelature. Moncada stated, Pope John Paul I, a few years before his election, wrote, "Escrivá was more radical than the other saints who taught about the universal call to holiness, while others emphasized monistic spirituality, appealed to lay people. For Escrivá, it is material work itself which must be turned into prayer and sanctity, thus providing lay spirituality." Criticisms against Opus Dei have promoted Catholic scholars and writers like Piers Paul Reed and Villotto Missouri to call Opus Dei a sign contradiction, in reference to the biblical quote of Jesus as a sign that is spoken against, said John Carnell Hayden, Cardinal Archbishop of Westminster. "One of the proofs of God's favour is to be a sign of contradiction. Almost all founders of all societies in the Church have suffered. Monsieur Escrivá de Blanca had no exception. Opus Dei has been attacked and its motives misunderstood. In this country and elsewhere, inquiry has always been vindicated. Opus Dei." One of Opus Dei's most prominent supporters was Pope John Paul II. John Paul cited Opus Dei's aim at sanctifying secular activities as a great ideal. He emphasized that Escovero's founding of Opus Dei was led by divine inspiration. He granted the organization its status as a personal prelature, stating that Escovero is counted among the great witnesses of Christianity. John Paul II canonized him in 2002 and called him a saint of ordinary life. Of the organization, John Paul II said, Opus Dei has had its aim at the sanctification of one's life while remaining within the world at one place of work and professionalism. To live the gospel in the world while living immersed in the world, but in order to transform it and redeem it with one of the personal love for Christ. This is truly a great ideal, which right from the beginning has anticipated the theology of the lay state of the Second Vatican Council and the post-consular period. One-third of the world's bishops petitioned for the canonization of Escovero. During the canonization, there were 42 cardinals and 470 bishops from around the world, general, superior, and many religious institutes, and representations of various Catholic groups. During these days, these church officials commented on the universal reach and the validity of the message of the founder. For his canonization homily, John Paul II said, with the teachings of Saint Jose Maria, it is easy to understand what the Second Vatican Council affirmed. There is no question, then, of the Christian message inhibiting men from building up the world. On the contrary, it is indicative to do these very things. Vatican II. Concerning the group's role in the Catholic Church, critics have argued that Opus Dei's unique status as a personal prelature gives it too much independence, making it essentially a church within a church, and that Opus Dei exerts disproportionately large influence within the Catholic Church itself, as illustrated, for example, by the rapid canonization of Escovero, which some considered to be irregular, 27 years. In contrast, Catholic officials say that the church authorities have even greater control of Opus Dei now that it's the head of a prelate appointed by the Pope, and its status as a prelate precisely means dependence. Allen says that Escovero's relatively quick canonization does not have anything to do with power, but with improvements in the procedure, and John Paul II's decision to make Escovero's sanctity and message known. The canonization of John Paul himself and Mother Teresa were much faster than Escovero's. Pope Benedict has been particularly strong supporter of Opus Dei and Escovero, pointing to the name and work of God. Benedict, then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, wrote that the Lord simply made use of Escovero, who allowed God to work. Ratzinger cited Escovero for correcting the mistaken idea that His Holiness is reserved for someone extraordinary people who are completely different from ordinary sinners. Even if he can be very weak, with many mistakes in his life, a saint is nothing other than to speak with God as a friend speaks with a friend, allowing God to work, the only one who can really make the world both good and happy. Ratzinger spoke of Opus Dei's surprising union of absolute fidelity to the Church's great traditional, to its faith, and unconditional openness to all challenges on the world, whether it's an academic world, in the field of work, or in matters of the economy, etc. He further explained the theocentrism of Escovero means this confidence in the fact that God is working now. We ought only to put ourselves at His disposal. This, for me, is a message of great importance. It's a message that leads to overcoming what could be considered the great temptation of our times, the pretense that the Big Bang, God retired from history. Pope Francis is the first pope who dealt with Opus Dei closely as a bishop, and according to James V. Satchel, S.J., is a friend of the Opus Dei. Francis referred to Saint Jose Maria as a persecutor of the Vatican II in proposing universal calls to His Holiness. In an analysis of John Allen, Pope Francis' strong dislike for clericalism, which he calls one of the worst evils in the Church, is a key factor for what Francis admires about Opus Dei, since Escovero's emphasis on dignity of the lately was a challenge to the ultra-clerical ethos of the Spanish Catholicism in the late 1920s. He has a devotion to Saint Jose Maria, and he played before his relics for 45 minutes. When he once visited the church, of the prelature in Rome, Francis defeated Alvaro de Portillo, the successor of Escobar, when Bergoglio most liked about Opus Dei was the work done for the poor by one of its schools in Buenos Aires. He thanks Opus Dei for its work to further the holiness of the priest and the Roman cura. Controversy. Throughout its history, Opus Dei has been criticized from many quarters, prompting journalists to describe Opus Dei as the most controversial force in the Catholic Church, and founder Jose Maria Escobar as a polarizing figure. Criticism of Opus Dei has centered on allegations of secretiveness, controversial and aggressive recruiting methods, strict rules governing members, elitism, and misogyny. A support of or participation in authoritarian right-wing governments, including fascist Franco regime, which governed Spain until 1978. The mortification of the first practiced by some of its members is also criticised. Opus Dei has also been criticised for allegedly seeking independence and more influence within the Catholic Church. On the other hand, according to several journalists who have researched Opus Dei separately, many criticisms against Opus Dei are based on fabrications by opponents. Several popes and other Catholic leaders have endorsed what they see as an innovative teaching on the sanctifying value of work and its fidelity to Catholic beliefs. In 2002, John Paul II canonized Saint Jose Maria Escobar and called him the saint of ordinary life. In recent years, Opus Dei has received international attention due to the novel Da Vinci Code and its film version in 2006, both of which prominent Christians and non-believers criticized as misleading, inactive, and anti-Catholic. Critics such as the Jesuit Waldemar Lechowski sometimes refer to the Opus Dei as Catholic or Christian or white form of Freemasonry. Criticism. Critics of Opus Dei include Maria del Carmen Tapia, an ex-member who was a high-ranking officer of Opus Dei for many years, liberal Catholic theologians such as Father James Martin, a Jesuit writer and editor and supports of Liberian theology such as journalist Penny Lurox, and Michael Wash, a writer on religious matters and a former Jesuit. Critics state that Opus Dei is intensely secret. For example, members generally do not disclose their affiliation with Opus Dei in public. Furthermore, under the 1950 Constitution, members were explicitly forbidden to reveal themselves without permission of their superiors. This practice has led to much speculation about who may be a member. Due to a part of its secrecy, the Jesuit-run magazine America referred to it as the most controversial group in the Catholic Church today. Opus Dei has been accused of deceptive and aggressive recruitment practices such as showering potential members with intense praise, love bombing, and instructing numeracies to form friendships and attend social gatherings despicably for recruiting progresses. Critics allege that Opus Dei maintains an extremely high degree of control over its members. For instance, past rules requires members to submit their incoming and outgoing mail to their superiors for inspection, and members are forbidden to read certain books without permission from their superiors. Critics charge that Opus Dei pressures numeracies to sever contact with non-members, including their own families. Exit counsellor David Clark has described Opus Dei as very cult-like. Critics assert that Escobar and the organization support radical right-wing governments, such as those of Franco, Augusto Picino, Albert Fremont of Peru during the 1990s. Both ministries and prominent supporters allegedly included members of Opus Dei, but there were also prominent Opus Dei members in parties that opposed those governments. Likewise, among Opus Dei members, there was also strong detractors from Franco, such as Antonio Fonten, and there have been allegations that Escobar expressed sympathy for Hitler. One former Opus Dei priest, Vladimir Felsman, who had been a vocal Opus Dei critic, says that Escobar once remarked that Hitler had been badly treated by the world, and he further declared that Hitler couldn't have been such a bad person. He couldn't have killed 6 million. It couldn't have been more than 4 million. Opus Dei has also been accused of elitism through targeting the intellectual elite, the well-to-do, and the socially prominent. As members of Opus Dei are Catholics, Opus Dei has been subjected to some criticism targeted to Catholics in general. For example, Opus Dei position to oppose sexual freedoms and to promote conservative morals. According to an investigative report produced by the advocacy group Catholics for Choice, the report further cites a study from sociologist Marco Burgos, alleging Opus Dei interference in the sex education program in Honduras that contradicted the Catholic faith. After conducting a critical study of Opus Dei, Catholic journalism John L. Allen Jr. concluded that Opus Dei should 1. Be more transparent, 2. Collaborate with members of religious institutes, and 3. Encourage its members to air out in public their criticisms of the institution. Cardinal George Pell, as its head of reporting directly to him, this is to the Pope. He appointed Australian Cardinal George Pell as its head, reporting directly to him, with authority over all economic and administrative activities within the Holy See and the Vatican City-State. This makes Pell de facto manager of the entire Roman Curia, since he holds the purse strings. After becoming Archbishop, Pell invited Opus Dei to establish themselves in Melbourne and then in Sydney. Under Pell's patronage, Opus Dei on the rise is said that of the others, including more established groups within the church, is sinking. Sydney Morning Herald Religious Affairs columnist wrote in January 2002, this reporter saw signs of a new elitism. A clerical culture is being encouraged in which there are highly select in crowd around Pell. Pell has maintained a close relationship with Australian Conservative PM Tony Abbott, and Tony Abbott was a Rhodes Scholar, and his party for decades. Days before Pope Borgello appointed Pell on April 30th, 2013 to his GA group of cardinals who advised the Pope on governing the church, Pell attended a gala dinner thanking the Melbourne-based Institute of Public Affairs, an ultra-conservative think tank. Rupert Murdoch was guest of honour and Abbott was a keynote speaker. Murdoch was awarded Pell a papal knighthood by Pope John Paul II for promoting the interests of society, the Church, and the Holy See. From Borgello's point of view, Pell has a sound business experience. Pell's archdiocese assets have nearly doubled since 2004 to over $1 billion, and at the end of 2013. Since Pell became Archbishop in 2001, the archdiocese has paid out $6.8 million to settle 82 claims for sex abuse, according to the figures provided by the Archdiocese business manager, an average of $83,200 each, reported one Australian newspaper. The disturbing consequences of the strategy adopted widely in the Catholic Church is that the Catholic leaders effectively accepted that human worth can be measured by an economic price. They accepted that the priority of the Church lay in the market, where its task was to preserve and enhance its final resources, noted another Australian publication. Pell is permanently relocating to Rome and will probably reside in the grand apartment he has used in the past as the Australian Church Guest House in Rome, recently refurbished at a cost between $30 million and $85 million. As regards to clerical sex abuse, Pell said the Church had been victim of smears and he had refused communion to gay and lesbian parishioners after Borgello's appointees shared his world views. Along the Secretariat of the Economy, the Pope also created a new Council for the Economy, which will consider policies and practices to prepare and analyse reports on the economic administrative activities of the Holy See. This council is comprised of 8 prelates and 7 laymen. The laymen must be the Opus Dei, reflecting various parts of the world, as we have seen a year after the Pope named his G8 from 5 continents of the world. Only those close to Opus Dei have advanced in power, and the rest have hardly been heard from since. Tokenism is becoming evident in all of Borgello's group appointments. By all accounts, all power rests firmly in the Pope and those close to him. The Council for Economy will be coordinated by Cardinal Reinhard Marx, another member of Borgello's G8. Marx was the invited speaker for the 300 guests of Opus Dei at the meeting held in the Deutsche Bank, Germany's central bank. He has presided at Mass celebrating Opus Dei's founder, Jose Maria Escobar, and visits the Opus Dei Center for University Students in Munich. This work is said to be very powerful, and Germany's financial capital of Frankfurt. Der Spiegel observed that there is hardly a German bishop who does not regard the organization with favor. After his appointment as coordinator for the Council of the Economy, Marx told the press that the Vatican's real bank would no longer be IOR, Institute for Religious Works, commonly referred to as the Vatican Bank, but will be the administration of the patrimony of the apostate see. The department, which, up to now, has primarily managed the humongous Vatican securities and property holdings, whether or not this decision is a result from pressure from financial regulators on Borgello and his predecessor to clean up the IOR, or else the bank will be prohibited from engaging in international transactions, remains to be seen. Opus Dei Vatican may have been preparing for his shift under the guidance of Peter Sutherland, managing director and chairman of Goldman Sachs International, former chairman of BP Oil, and member of the International Advisory Board for the flagship Opus Dei Graduate Business School. Sutherland has been the Vatican consultant for many years and was appointed by Borgello to be the supervisory board for the APSA. In the event that APSA comes under the same regulatory pressures as IOR, Banco Centre already offered its availability to the Vatican months ago. I suspect that Opus Dei Banking Group will handle any Vatican financial dealings which, if exposed, would threaten the carefully constructed public image of Pope Francis, since it already has the reputation of being ethically challenged. See Banco Senator SA fined 200 million for advanced failings. Banco Santera, the epitome of banker and evil. Sorry for saying those words wrong. One of 7 cardinals, in addition to Mark's name to the Council of the Economy of Houston, Daniel and Narado. The rest came from Peru, France, Mexico, Italy, Hong Kong, and South Africa, as well as so many of the Pope's other appointments. 3 of the cardinals have words and deeds regarding ecology, sex crimes, and cover-up, which are deeply troubling. Okay, it goes on here with these Catholicism in the Liberal Party, and that Anthony Albanese is Catholic as well. They're all controlled by Opus Dei or the Jesuits. Um, 30 years ago, the Liberal Party began to convert transformations, so convert, in fact, that few inside the party even noticed it was happening. It began with disproportionate influx of Catholic members that traditionally would have been more comfortable in the Labour Party. The new membership came primarily as a result of encouragement from within the church, which saw its traditional influence of the Labour Party falling away, and it was coming from within the Opus Dei. Traditionally, the Liberal Party was bastion of Protestantism. At one point, when Sir Robert Menzies was Prime Minister, there was only one Catholic Liberal member in the House of Representatives. By the time Tony Abbott became the first Catholic Liberal Party Prime Minister, nearly 50% of his cabinet was Catholic. All of this added influence when only 25% of Australians claimed to be Catholic. This disproportionate nature of his representation is even starker with one realizes that only 15% of Australian Catholics are actually practicing Catholics, i.e., those who attend church regularly. Church teaching opposing communism, divorce, abortion, gay marriage, and euthanasia have been progressively under threat since 1970, and as local parish congregations continue to dwindle, the need for the church to have strong parliamentary influence become paramount. To the Catholic Church, power is everything. The current disproportionate representation is by no means accidental or coincidental, but lately things have not been going well for it. The evolution of Malcolm Turnbull to leadership has upset the cosmic order of things, and the Conservatives, aka right-hand Catholics, see themselves on a collision course with irrelevance. The defection of Cory Bernardi from the Liberal Party is a symptom of this malaise. The image of him as Australia's Donald Trump is misplaced. Bernardi is nothing like Trump. If anything, he's the opposite. But he can see where the populist shift is going and what concerns him. Bernardi is not a populist. He is committed Christian conservative concerned that the populist movement in Australia might be witnessed with the rise of Hansonism and gaining momentum. Primarily, Bernardi is concerned with the threat to Australia's secular lifestyle and the influence of means traditional Catholic values. His deflection won't weaken Catholic influence within the Liberal Party, but he did not think it was doing enough. What he thinks he can achieve out on his own is not known, possibly even to him, but clearly his idea where Australia should be heading is at odds with the Liberal Party agenda. What we do know is that the Catholic agenda within the party comes at the expense of rational policy decision, something that will do the party no good. Therefore, we can expect that the cumbering of the party will continue. That's why